My apologies for the slight delay. We've had some technical issues, including me getting kicked out. But anyway, my name's David Oates. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for PRODA. Thank you all for taking some time to come and listen. Really appreciate it. We're going to talk about the power of connecting the market in terms of commercial real estate particularly. But a quick 5-minute PRODA overview for those of you that don't know us. We've got quite a few on, so I guess some of you don't know who we are. And then a short panel discussion with Nikesta here, who's the Head of Systems Europe for PGI Real Estate. And hopefully Jesper Voigt, who is Original Execution Lead for ING Real Estate Finance, one of the largest lenders in Europe. So the two panelists introduce themselves once we get there. Just a very short, sort of 5 or 6 slide introduction to PRODA. If we think about the challenge and the real reason for putting this session on this morning, is there's a challenge in our industry is that everybody speaks a different language when it comes to data. Everybody uses inconsistent formats. They use their own models. Everybody's using different output software systems. And obviously with the growth of PropTech over the last couple of years, the number of those output systems is growing significantly. And what that has led to is a massive disconnect when organizations are trying to share data. PRODA is very focused on a very specific data set, which is the rent roll data. But if you think about that data set, pretty much the whole industry is based on it, whether you're making investment decisions or whether you're making asset management decisions, whether you're doing quarterly reporting. It's that data set that's very, very important for those activities. Now that everybody's speaking a different language, what that means is data becomes very, very difficult, particularly to interpret because it is in different formats. And therefore, reporting cycles becoming time consuming. We all know that typically you will start your reporting cycle on the first day of the new quarter, and you might finish it 6 to 8 weeks in. Which means that for those 6 to 8 weeks, productivity on real revenue generation tasks are not as high as it should be. And it also tends to mean that we're using very expensive resources, very expensive, very talented people in our organizations to do data management, which in itself is a low value task. I've always argued that data has no value. Information has value. So you're using a very costly resource to take data that you're given from operating partners or property managers or whoever, or funds, and converting it into real information, which you can then work on, make decisions on, etc. So I think that challenge brings up a couple of questions that we're going to answer this morning. One is, can we streamline that data flow from property manager to fund, to the valuation houses, to the banks? Can that be streamlined? Can that be made much more simple and therefore much more effective to use? And the second one is, everybody on this call has probably spent millions and millions of dollars, if you combine it, on investment in systems, whether those systems be Coyote or Argus or Yardi or MRI, whoever it might be. Can you maximize the value of that investment? The core data sets are in multiple formats and quite often unchecked and unvalidated. So, PRODA, which was founded in 2017, we went live with the product last year, based in London and founded by 2 real estate experienced professionals, not tech guys. PRODA acts as the Google translator for that core real estate data set, so that everybody can speak the same language, everybody can work in the same format, everybody can work to a standardized model, so that you end up with a seamless and streamlined process. When you think about the value chain today, this is the typical reporting cycle. A property manager takes the data from the assets, puts it into a spreadsheet in their format. They might use SAP in the back end or do something else. They will send that format to the operating partner. The operating partner will then spend a lot of time putting that into their own format and then sending it to the fund. Except that's not in the fund's format either. The fund has to then put it in their own format. Then they send it off to the bank or the surveyor, the broker or the insurer. And those organisations do exactly the same process. So if you think we did some work and we figured out it typically takes anything up to 2 to 3 hours to process a single rent roll and put it into your own format. If you take that across these 7 steps that we've got on this chart, that could be 21 man hours for one single rent roll. PRODA, by simplifying it at the front end, seamless translation of data between organisations. That means that somebody does the work at the first of the process in our property manager, and then using PRODA, they can output the same format, already validated, already standardised, and in a format that you want, and they can send that through the chain. And we've seen 95-90% in terms of time for processing with 100% accuracy. It's in this very high level. It's very simple. You drag and drop a rent roll into PRODA. PRODA's a SaaS application. Would expect then automate the data capture, the standardization, the validation, and give you the ability to track changes simply, very quickly. And then that standardized data can be exported into any system you want. I've already mentioned Coyote for deal management. It could be Argus for valuation cash flow management. It could be Yardi for property management, etc., etc., etc. And then that means that data is in a state where you can really facilitate the analysis of that data and turn it into real information. So in summary, PRODA makes it very easy to work with rent roll data and to use other software systems for forecasting. And that is the key. For me, the output is the all-important step of that process. And if we can give you the ability to take rent roll data and use it in the systems that you've invested large amounts of money in, to make those systems more effective, increase productivity, increase efficiency, then I think we have a winning solution. So what does that mean in real summary? So we're automating the data processing and the validation of that data, which means we can save huge amounts of time and increase efficiency, but most importantly, improve the data quality and make it more accessible. It's not all in 7, 10 different places. It automates the tracking of changes from previous periods, whether that's at the unit level, the property or the portfolio level, giving you immediate and accurate views on what has changed in that rent roll between this quarter and last quarter, this year and last year, this month and last month. That immediately reduces reporting time down to a manageable amount. And it means you can actually work on that data more often. We know of one large financial institution that only really processes rent rolls once a year because of the man-hour implication, when they really need to process them once a quarter. So that money, you're able to then manage those major lease events, terminations, upgrades, whatever it might be, much more effectively. As I said earlier, by put the transfer of the data into your preferred format, you can maximise the investment you made in other systems, reduce processing time. Overall, just process simplification. And as a side benefit, you can build your own comparables database. So I want to jump out of this now. Thank you for attending today. I'm going to ask some questions at the end. We'll have time for questions at the end. But what I want to do now is introduce Nikesh and Jesper, and it looks like while I've been talking, we've got Jesper on. Great.
Yeah, that's right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. So Jesper and Nikesh, would you like to make quick introductions?
Please go first, Nikesh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, David. So Nikesh, I am head of systems for PGIM Real Estate for Europe. I look after all the systems, all the implementations, looking at innovative solutions, really creating efficiency within the business with regards to how we can use better use data and also manage some of the projects in Asia. That's overall my remit at PGIM.
Thank you, Nikesh. Jesper?
Jesper Vugts, work in the ING Real Estate Finance Department, responsible for origination and execution of loans. Recently moved to our London team, where we have a dedicated project lab, and there I was responsible for setting up relationships with external startups to see how we can benefit from more efficiency by solutions provided by these startups. And that's currently what I'm doing as well.
Thank you, Jesper. So thank you both for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I think in terms of kicking off, I talked about everybody speaking a different language. How do you see that impacting your business, and what do you think we can do to change that? Nikesh, maybe you'd like to answer that first.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think you also made a point around data sharing. So, I mean, across the board in industry, especially real estate industry, we're not really good at sharing data. One of the major issues, and actually Rick's highlighted in the report last year around data and usage of data in real estate, they said that the concept of sharing data is still alien to many in the industry. And that's a fact, because one of the biggest challenge that we have is because we do not have a global standards of sharing data and a data dictionary that we can use. I mean, don't get me wrong, the built environment has well-established and robust set of data standards about collection, management, and use of data. But to truly realize the benefit of data in future, it must be able to flow freely across the whole sector, beyond the existing silos. And standards have a very key role to play in this room. We see a lot of projects happening when it comes to data standardization, either is a company-based or either a region-based or sector-based or within an asset class-based, but we don't see a comprehensive standardization coming up. And one of the major issues actually is that somebody has to own it, somebody has to sponsor it, somebody has to maintain it. So unless and until we get over this challenge, I don't think we'll be able to truly realize the potential of data. And data is actually, we are creating more data than ever before. And in the future, we will be creating more data with the introduction of IoTs, artificial intelligence, RPA, big data, internet, cloud computing, and everything. You can see that we have a huge amount of data, but are we really truly utilizing that data for our day-to-day decisions? So I would say the trust is not there yet. You speak to valuers, they don't really you trust the data that comes from third party. They have to really verify themselves, check themselves to really use that for value property. So you talk about as an industry level, I believe that unless we have a very agreed upon standard, we will not be able to realize the potential of the data. At PGIM, we are lucky, I think, in the sense that we started our digital transformation project about around 3 years ago, where we have a clear strategy from like a bottom-up approach and a very high-level support from senior management to really implement a data strategy across, for example, our European businesses. So with this COVID-19 situation where we needed the information on our pulse, like really on the go, we were able to provide that. So, but first of all, we had to agree a kind of standard across the company. So we have to understand, okay, what you call a kind of rent or area in Europe. So German, they had their own definitions. The French, they had their own definitions. The UK have own definitions, and Dutch, etc. So creating that standardization at first really helped us to implement that strategy.
Okay, thank you. The same question to you, Jesper.
Yeah, I think we see the same problems, and as a lender, you are basically at the end of the real estate cycle. So we get a lot of data and from our clients in different formats and templates, which we have to deal with. We are basically also based in different geographies where we see different sets of data. So the lack of a clear, consistent taxonomy is, in my opinion, the biggest pain point in order to share data. And we are now looking into possibilities to set up some kind of consortium with different parties in the sector to agree on a standardized set of data and a clear taxonomy with a pan-European scope. So if there are any parties interested to bring this further together with us, we are more than happy to further discuss. And maybe also good to mention is that we already deep dived into getting a clear taxonomy for valuation purposes in the Netherlands. So we are setting up also some kind of consortium with the major Dutch banks and valuation firms. But again, the problem is that this is only limited to the Netherlands, while we actually need a pan-European solution. So also for that solution, we are more than happy to deep dive into any possibilities to further extend.
Good, interesting. Thank you, Jesper. I mean, carrying on from that, and I know you and I have had a lot of conversations about this, Jesper, but how do you see the data element within a digital transformation strategy as being this type of tech? How can we use PropTech to speed up the?
Well, what I see right now, in addition to a lack of a clear, consistent taxonomy, is that a lot of solutions offered by very interesting parties is that these are not geography agnostic. So these solutions are often focused on a really specific geography or on a specific asset class with its own market practice standards. While we as a lender, but I believe also PGIM as an asset manager, require pan-European solutions. And once these solutions are not ready or not available, people will still rely on Excel rather than buying 20 different solutions in order to tackle all these different aspects. Are you still there, David?
I think we lost David.
Yeah.
No, I completely agree with your point, Jesper. I think, as you said, the solution has to be, number one, for me, of course, it has to be regions agnostic, but also sector agnostic, right?
Yeah.
So you can't say that it's only work for retail, it's only work for residential, etc. And also it has to be an intelligent solution. So we know, I think, in a stage of our technology developments that we have a very intelligent applications on our phones these days, the way we can quickly look at the results and look at the analysis of those applications. But when it comes to our real estate technologies, we still do not have those solutions. We talk about from theoretical perspective, predictive, you can say analytics, predictive, like where you're going to be doing your investment in the future, but it's still pretty much in theoretical sense. So for me, if you talk about an AI and what AI can do, I believe AI has a huge potential within real estate, but it has to be an intelligent solution, not just doing an RPA, robotic process automation, where they're just doing same processes that humans were doing, but just in a systematic manner. But it should be able to create that intelligence out of it that we as asset managers and you as lenders are able to see it and get the benefits of those.
Yeah, no, fully agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think certainly, both ING and PGIM are at the forefront of using tech to really transform the way we do business in the real estate industry. I think, I made a point earlier when I was talking about, we are using very valuable, very experienced resources for data management. Do you see a way around that? I mean, do you see a way of getting those people back to the point where they're doing, core valuable tasks as opposed to just pure data management?
And I mean, I look at from two perspectives, right, David? Number one, I believe that let the professional do their jobs. So if we are asset manager, for example, so we will never become a data analyst. So that's the first one. So we also outsource pretty much a lot of our functions, for example, fund accounting to transfer agencies, and rely on our third-party vendors to do the job for us. And that really helps because we believe that they are the experts and they do that. Same with data. So outsourcing data to third party, which actually are experts. Either they have an engine that works for us, or they have the managed service and people and have experience, and a number of years of experience that they can actually provide that data and quality data to us. And it's cost effective, it's flexible, and also, as I said, it makes it very agile on a go. Number two, I think each and every one of us has to become some sort of, you can say, data analyst. Even if you're an asset manager or portfolio manager, you need to value the data and how the data flows and understand where the data comes into it. Because it's very good to have a fancy system with all bells and whistles, and it may have data in it, but if the data is not used and utilized and understood what value the data can bring to the department or bring to assets, that data is actually useless, and that investment into that application is also not bringing any returns. So we might say on paper that we have a very good system, but if it's not being used and utilized, then really there is no benefit to it. So there's changing that kind of mindset and culture that data doesn't just belong to like IT department, it belongs to everyone, and everyone is responsible for that data. Is actually, I would say, that two major points that could improve our kind of, you could say, data management, data utilization, and getting value out of it.
Thank you, Nikesh. Okay, I've just been told we can run on a little bit longer than we planned to, which is good. And Jesper, do you see you have the same problem in ING? I mean, I know you have a lot of people doing data management.
Yeah.
Do you see a way of streamlining that process for yourselves?
Yeah, so I think the biggest problem we are currently facing is that our data is captured in multiple systems which are not communicating with each other. So in order to unlock the potential of all the data we are capturing, we should find solutions to integrate the multiple systems with each other, but also with external systems. And I think that should be the starting point to further enhance data quality, but also to further enhance data analysis, which should be a mix of both internal and external data. And that's something we are not there yet. We are now looking into different opportunities and possibilities to make that happen. And by doing so, I think it's relatively easy to connect the dots, and which in the end will save you a lot of time.
Okay, interesting. Okay, cool, thank you. I guess really, because I've got two more questions I'd like us to cover. The first one is, again, I touched on during my discussion about there is a chain of data flow in our industry, from property manager through operating partner, fund, lender, insurance company, valuer, broker, whatever it might be. I'll come to you first, Jesper. Where do you see there could be value in streamlining that chain?
Well, by streamlining the data, I think first of all you eliminate a substantial amount of data flows via email, which is still, in my opinion, a bit more risky. But also it gives you the opportunity to basically passively standardize data, because you are all using the same format in these data flows. So you automatically are creating a standardization, which we are a huge fan of, because as I told you before, we are typically in the end of the real estate cycle. So we receive data which is produced and processed by different parties. And I think by streamlining that, you create a huge improvement on the data quality, but also on the standardization. So yeah, we see a lot of benefits in flowing data all across the network.
And is that something strategically you're looking at across the business right now?
Yeah, I think our initial priority is to digitize and automate our internal processes. But we are not only looking at these priorities, we are also looking beyond these priorities. And I think this is something we are very keen on further developing, especially together with you, for instance.
Okay, good, thank you. And what about you, Nikesh? How are you looking at trying to simplify the data flow process across the, I guess, across the ecosystem rather than just within PGIM?
Yeah, I believe, honestly, I believe that standardizing data, especially at the origination, where the data is originated, either be your lawyers or either be your property managers, which are actually creating those data, streamline that process will hugely benefit the whole, you can say, industry and every group that is involved after that. So that's where I would be focusing and educating that. I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is actually educating, for example, the property managers that this data is valuable to us and how we're going to be using that data, so they can actually look after our data. So I think that's where I think educating them, and also standardizing data, for example, from lawyer to property managers, and then onwards will have a huge impact in our industry. So, for example, as you know, I also chair a forum called REAMTech, and we have been discussing around a kind of test case where we were trying to work with lawyers, some government bodies, some software companies to really look at, and fund managers to look at, okay, how we can standardize some sort of data. For example, looking at lease, maybe we should have one lease template across the whole industry, right? This is the lease template that comes out of, for example, MRI. It can go into Yardi, it can go to Argus, it can go to PRODA can produce it, Coty can produce it. So really the flow of that data, especially just on lease, we're talking about you can get 40, 50 data points. But if you can actually just streamline that, just that process, you have a huge, you can say, improvement in our data quality, and also the streamlining of the process itself, because that's where most of the time is spent when it comes to analyzing and verifying data.
Excellent. And just while we're on, would you like to tell people listening a little bit more about REAMTech, Nikesh, as you've got the floor for a couple of minutes?
Okay, yeah. So REAMTech is as the name says, real estate investment technology peer group. Myself and Imran from LaSalle, we basically created this group about three and a half years ago. Basically, we get all the CIOs, CTOs, head of system technology from different fund in investment management in Europe. Come together every quarter. We are now about 35 members, representing around 900 of a billion under asset management. So we meet on a quarterly basis. We discuss various topics, really getting the networking going. That was my first kind of goal. But now really going beyond and see actually what we can do. We have a lot of leverage in our group. We can actually initiate these projects ourselves, or actually support some of these projects going forward, and create a collaborative kind of platform for everyone to contribute together and make a difference. For example, just this data standardization, I believe we have the platform and we can make that change and influence the market to really one standard in the industry.
And if anybody wants to contact you about getting involved, how do they get hold of you?
I mean, you can contact myself or Imran or anyone actually at the REAMTech Roundtable or Forum. As I said, we have about 30 plus members. So, I mean, best would be to reach out myself or Imran.
Thanks, Nikesh. Just before we go to questions, have either of you got any final comments you'd like to make? Jesper?
No, yeah, I already briefly touched upon it. We are open to have some discussions to see how we can set up some kind of consortium to further elaborate on the standardization and taxonomy in the industry. And I already discussed this with Nikesh, who is also open to further explore potential opportunities. So feel free to reach out in case of any suggestions or ideas.
Okay, thank you. Nikesh, any closing comments before questions?
Yeah, I believe market is, I think, has not been as ready as now to really adopt a standardization. There is, I would say, there's a motivation there. People know that unless and until we standardize our data sets, we're not going to be able to utilize and use the potential of data. So I would say motivation is there. It's just somebody, and we as a group have a collective responsibility to come and take this initiative forward and create that standard in the industry that can be adopted. And working with Jesper and other groups that are working on, I mean, there are various, and I'm speaking to a lot of them at the moment. So just to have that collaborative contact with each other, make sure that we support each other's projects. And if, for example, something happened in the Dutch, but Jesper working, if can be adopted across the industry, what we can do, and especially what we're doing in, for example, in UK, looking at the least data standards. What can we do, for example, implementing across Europe, for example, Germany or Netherlands or France, etc. So that will be very important.
Good, thank you. What I'd like to do, and we have a moderator that's going to help. Can we open up to questions? Manisha, who's moderating, could you maybe open to Ami first to ask the first question? If we can't make the tech work, I've got the questions in front of me, so I will. No, I'll cover the question off. So, Ami Katecha asked a question about the AI element of Proda, and also whether the data is shared with external parties. So very quickly, Proda is an AI-driven solution, very machine learning based. And what that machine learning does is recognize previous data sets and learn from those rent roll data sets, so that when you upload a rent roll for the second time, so maybe next quarter or next month, Proda would automatically recognize that and reformat it into the format you'd set in the first time. And obviously, as with any AI or machine learning driven solution, the more data that's put in, the more the machine learns, the more effective it becomes. And if you upload a brand new rent roll to Proda for the first time, the machine will recognize it, all the columns and the data sets, to about an 85% accuracy, but with a 96% accuracy that will recommend the top 10 possibilities, top 8, sorry, possibilities. But the second time you upload that rent roll, that AI element will make it 100% accurate. In terms of whether the data is shared with external parties, no, in that it's your data, unless we're talking about this chain of events from property manager to operating partner, where you have the ability to share to a secure database. But that will only be between you and the target organization. The data still stays private to yourselves. The second question was from Hanu Rantanen. Again, can we do that on audio, Manisha, or shall I just read it out? No, I'll just read it out. So Hanu asked a question, which is to, I guess, really to you, Nikesh, from a systems perspective. And it's, how do you see the role of APIs versus one-to-one file-based integration between different applications and legacy systems?
Sorry to interrupt. That's Hanu from Helsinki. If I just joined.
Yes.
Yeah. So
did you hear that, Nikesh? Hanu's here.
Yep. Hi, Hanu.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
I'm on the.
Hanu, would you like to ask your question yourself?
Yeah, I've been listening to this for quite some time. I've been working with the data issues, since we incepted our application Assetti, which we, by the way, cooperated with Coyote as well, and I know Coyote guys, the founder. But my question more like not from the data validation point of view, but more like data sharing point of view, because we've done a lot, hell lot of one-to-one integrations to existing legacy systems, typically in the Northern Europe, to PM and financial admin systems. And we've been embracing API for like 3 years, but still we see the degree of API really in work really rather limited, sort of like. So it's more like a general question that how do you see the role of APIs versus more traditional file-based one-to-one integrations in the like now and in the future? That's for the all of you guys.
Yeah, I think there are two answers to that, or two, I would say, two comments to that, Hanu. Number one, actually, as you know, the legacy systems are quite limited when it comes to APIs. Although you might say some of the incumbents, they say they will do API integration, but actually it's not true API. It's a file-based transition. So that's the number one issue, that we have a limitation with regards to systems. And number two, actually, limitation with regards to, you can say, regulations, internal firewalls, stuff like that. So, for example, at PGIM, we won't be able to do an API with an external provider, right? It has to be within our own environment. So if something comes within Prudential, then we are able to do that, because we will be able to expose our ports and expose our data to the external world. So that's, I think, yeah, it's a bit of compliance and regulations and also firewall issue that really limits us from API, a true API. But even though I still think that with whatever we have currently available with push or pull system, where you do one file-based transfer through an FTP or secure FTP, I still believe that we can improve on that and can and share data more regularly. It's just that those two systems are not talking to each other right now. And lack of standardization, and I mentioned that again, is the biggest problem, because you actually done a lot of integration yourself, and I've done millions of them. Is that problem is actually every system has their own definitions and how they store data. When they call rent, they might have different definition to it. When you try to map these, that's where most of the time is spent. It's not actually the technology is there. I mean, you can integrate two systems. Within a day or so.
Yep.
That's not a problem. It's actually trying to understand the mapping and how each and every system are defined. I believe that's one of the biggest issues. So for me, we have to overcome these challenges if we can really truly do the kind of API.
I think you really captured the point, the mapping issue. We've been really experiencing that for quite some time, I have to say. Seeing like 50 systems or 60 systems now, and it's pretty interesting. Like basic data, what's a property? How do you actually construct a property? What's a unit and so forth. So, but yep, that's pretty. Yep, you nailed the point.
PG, when I look at I think our kind of journey, technology journey or data journey, most of my time spent is actually at that level, standardization, looking at what at PGIM we believe the data to be, and then speaking to our third provider or data provider and say, guys, this is the data we want, and this is the definition of the data, and we want this data from your system. I don't care what format you produce, doesn't matter to me, but if you can relate that definition to my definition, that works for me. So that's where most of the time is spent. Actually, not into making do both systems. That was easier. It's actually the educating these people and making sure that they understand what we mean by rent when we say.
Yep. Okay, thanks for the answer. I'm not going to spend the whole time for a Q&A, so.
Thanks, Hanu, and thanks for joining. Okay, so we've got a couple more questions. We do need to finish in about 5 minutes, but I've got a question from Pablo Roldos, which I think is probably relevant for both of you, and maybe even particularly for Jesper, because you have this challenge being a financial institution. Pablo wants to know, how do you deal with data IP or data ownership issues when you are potentially streamlining data across organizations, as we outlined earlier?
Yeah. So first of all, because we are regulated by different institutional bodies, we need to comply with all these different requirements. So that basically means that we prefer to build everything basically in some kind of internal cloud, and as a result, that would mean that you would basically copy the existing structure into an internal structure, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So we are now having discussions to see how we can use external cloud solutions, which is still ongoing. But if you look from a, let's say, ownership perspective, we are obviously not the owner of the data because it's our clients. And therefore, we have to, discuss with clients whether solutions are acceptable to them before we can actually start pilots with data. And we need to tick a lot of boxes from a regulatory perspective. And actually, I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know all the answers on that, but it's quite extensive.
Okay. And Nikesh, have you got any comments on data ownership as it transfers between organizations?
I mean, of course, I think that I just alluded to the fact that whenever we are onboarding a new kind of company to share data with them, we have a very thorough due diligence process where we understand who owns the data, where the data is going to flow, who's going to be using it. And especially, for example, if you're working with you guys, PRODA, and I know, David, you've been through that process, it's really understanding, at what level you're going to be having the data and what kind of ownership you have and where you can and cannot share. So it's very thorough. And I think that's one of the, you can say, barrier to when it comes to sharing data, because we as a financial institution and we as a real estate manager, we really value our data, and especially with GDPR and all the other regulations around it, we do not share our data easily. So we have to go through this thorough process, which could be frustrating for some of the prop companies. They don't understand the value of data and how well, I mean, honestly, they get frustrated. They say, why is it important for you to know, where my data resides? You say Amazon, yes, but who has access to it? Who has keys to that data? It's very important for us. So I think there's an education on the public side to understand that, we can't just, flip over our tenancy schedule to you. It's not going to happen. You have to go through a process. So it's just by going through that due diligence process and really make sure that people understand, we understand, and have a contract to understand where the data ownership is and what is the sharing and responsibility.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikesh. Okay, and we've got one more question. There was a comment actually before I get to that from Romelu Simionato, who said that it seems like a lot of data that you need comes from design and construction, which is available in BIM models and associated information such as geospatial context, and therefore no need for AI. Slightly contentious statement, but I thought I'd just share it with the group. We've got one more question from Rolly Mags. I think this is quite interesting. What's your view on how far the real estate sector has progressed in data standards as a whole? So, for example, you've got the UK Housing Data Standard as a subset of OSCRE. And I know none of us are particularly residential in focus, but do you see progress on data standards across the industry?
Yeah, we do.
Kesh, perhaps you'd like to start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we do see a lot of progress. But again, the problem is that these are separated initiatives which are not connected to each other. And in the end, that should be the case in case of making it all work. So I gave an example of a Dutch initiative working on valuation standards. But if the Germans are not agreeing on these standards, it doesn't make a big difference in for all the relevant stakeholders. So we see a lot of initiatives ongoing, but we should connect the dots in order to make it work.
Okay. And Nikesh, do you have similar thoughts or something different?
No, actually, I know this project, and one of the successful projects I think that Oscar's done, and great work. I think it's a one problem and one solution, and it's really good. I think we just need to expand that, right? So that's a very limited data set that we're talking about here, and I think we alluded to that in the earlier discussions that it's quite siloed, these projects. So they have to be industry focused rather than they have to be agnostic of sector, class, and region. So this is great. Actually, this is a starting point, and that's where I believe these pilots or trials or tests are going to be the foundations of the future standard data, global one. So these are good projects, and I think we are getting there. We're going to be having more. I think I know Bricks. They were building the head of the lease standardization project to really standardize what is your head lease and stuff like that. So I believe these will be then contributing to the overall standard that we agreed. So this is great progress, but I think we're still somewhat far from achieving a global standard, or at least a European standard.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to thank Nikesh and Jesper for giving up the time this morning and being so interesting. I thought it was a really, really interesting panel discussion, so thank you for that. Thank you to everybody that's joined on the conference call. I will very quickly, if anybody wants to reach out to us, actually I should share the screen before that, sorry. Just let me reshare my screen. There's the contact detail if you want to come back and talk to us, or please reach out through this forum. But thank you very much to Jesper. Thank you, Nikesh, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, David. Bye.
Thanks, friend. Bye-bye.